A customer thread runs long. On message 6, Priya's desk promises a full refund and everyone is happy. 34 messages later, the same customer asks when the refund lands and the desk tells them no refund was ever agreed. Remember from episode 2 that the API forgets nothing because it remembers nothing. Every turn you resend the whole conversation. So by message 40, the request carries all 40 messages, every tool result, and the rules and the promise from message 6 is buried somewhere in the middle of it. Freeze because nothing here is broken. This is what an unmanaged conversation does on its own. And that's the sentence for the whole episode. What reaches the model is something you design and nobody designed this. Here's how the exam asks it. A support conversation runs long, later replies start contradicting earlier commitments, and the cost per message keeps climbing. What should the developer do? The item parks in the corner, and by the end you'll know why a bigger window is the wrong instinct. Call it 2 more of your 53 and it's the episode that takes the C and say quarter almost all the way home. Start with the thing people get wrong about the context window, which is what the model can read in one request. Everything counts toward it. Your rules, your examples, your tool definitions, every past turn, every tool result, and the actual question. Tool definitions surprise people most. They're instructions you wrote once and now pay for on every single call. And here is the part that inverts most people's instinct. As the window fills, accuracy and recall actually get worse, which is a different complaint from slower or pricier. The documentation has a name for it. Context rot, which means a fuller window is a less reliable one, and that's a property of the model, not a bug in your code. So curating what goes in matters as much as how much room is left. What you leave out is a decision you're making, whether or not you think about it. One vocabulary note before we move on. The exam guide says context drift and the documentation says context rot. Same idea, and the docs word is the one you are more likely to see inside an answer option. And know what happens when you actually run out, because the exam splits it in two. If your input on its own is bigger than the window, the request is refused before anything runs. That one is simple and it never varies. If the input fits but the input plus the most output you allowed doesn't, today's models accept it and let generation stop partway. They tell you that's what happened in the stop reason from episode 2, so the answer arrives incomplete rather than not at all. Which explains Priya's thread exactly, and it's worth saying plainly. The promise was never deleted. It was still in the request, and in a window that full, things stop being found reliably wherever they happen to sit. So the cheapest thing you can do is take out what you've already spent. You always resend a conversation, that part is fixed. What you choose is how much of it goes back. In a long-running conversation, the biggest waste is almost always old tool results, meaning what came back the last 20 times you looked something up. There is a documented mechanism for it. The API can clear old tool results once the conversation grows past a threshold you set for that, leaving a small placeholder where each one was. The detail the exam likes is that your own stored copy of the conversation isn't touched. The pruning happens to what gets sent, not to your records, so nothing is lost on your side. The docs name 4 ways to fight tool-driven bloat, and the useful thing is that they attack different sources. Load fewer tool definitions and call tools from code, letting your program run the lookup and put only what it needs into the reply. Cache the part of the request that never changes, so you stop paying to reread it, and prune what has already piled up. You don't pick one, you notice which of those 4 your particular thread is drowning in. Pruning throws away what you no longer need. The harder half is what you do still need, and that's compaction. Compaction means replacing what happened with a summary of what happened. The API can do this for you, past its own threshold. It writes a summary block, and when you send that block back, everything before it is dropped from what gets sent. Again, that's the wire and not your records. Your stored conversation keeps everything. So the thread keeps going and the request stops growing, which is the whole trick. 2 documented edges, because the exam likes the edges. When you have tools defined, the summarizing step sometimes calls a tool instead of writing the summary, and the summary block comes back empty. So check the block actually has content before you trust it to stand in for the conversation. And the summary is always written by the same model you are already calling, so you can't quietly hand the summarizing job to a cheaper one. There's one piece of exam bait here. An older way to do this lies in the client libraries, where the library rewrites your history itself. That one is deprecated and being removed. So an option offering it is describing the way that's being taken away, not the way forward. Both of those shrink what's already in the window. The structural move is to stop putting it there at all. If one long running job has to read a large document, search an order system, and draft a reply, all three of those can end up in the same conversation forever. The documented answer is isolation. Hand a piece of work to a separate agent that has its own window, let it do the reading in there, and take back only the conclusion. The searching, the false starts, and the raw documents never enter your main thread, and the docs frame this as a quality lever, not only a capacity one, which is worth holding on to because it's the bridge into the what runs quarter later in this course, where agents stop being a way to save room and become the thing you are designing. Back to the long conversation at full size, and now you are armed. Option 1, move to a model with a larger context window so everything fits. Option 2, compact the conversation into a summary and prune old tool results. Option 3, keep resending the full history so nothing is ever lost. Option 4, use the client library's own history rewriting feature to shrink the messages. Name the decision first, what Claude sees and says, because every option changes what arrives in the request. Two constraints this time, and they point the same way. Answers are getting less reliable and cost is climbing. One answer has to fix both. The bigger window dies on rule 1, and this is the satisfying one because the middle of this episode disproved it directly. A bigger window doesn't stop the rot, it just delays the moment you notice, and it makes every message more expensive, not less. Resending it all unchanged is a corpse already. That's precisely what the desk was doing when it forgot the refund, so it dies on the constraint and on the story you watched. And the client library option dies on the documented fact that feature is deprecated and the supported path is the one the API runs for you. What survives is compaction plus pruning, the only supported option that shrinks what's sent while keeping what mattered. Which means it answers the reliability constraint and the cost constraint with one move. That's the whole quarter's lesson in one item. What reaches the model is a thing you design, not a thing that accumulates. Here is what the forgotten refund taught you. Everything in a request costs window, your rules, your examples, your tool definitions, every pass turn and every tool result alongside the message you are sending. More context is worse, not better, and the docs call that context rot, so curating beats capacity. Prune old tool results, compact long threads into a summary, and know the client library's own version of compaction is deprecated. And know the two overflow cases. Input alone too big is refused outright. Input plus your output ceiling stops partway with a stop reason. And when one job would fill a window on its own, give it its own window and take back only the answer. The counter moves to 29 of 53, and the see and say segment is nearly full with one piece of it left for tomorrow. Tomorrow, the desk hands the dashboard a beautiful paragraph it can't read, and when the output is garbage, you have to prove whose fault it is.